If you've ever bought a high-end audio interface because the glossy pictures promised studio-grade sound, only to find it sitting half-used on the desk while you wrestle with latency or missing features, you're not alone. The gap between marketing hype and everyday workflow can be frustrating enough to make you think twice before splurging on the next big name. That's why today's review is all about cutting through the noise and figuring out whether the Universal Audio Apple X8p Gen 2 with the UAD Analog Classics bundle is actually the kind of tool that will move your productions forward or just another pricey collector's item. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about the problem most buyers hit when they start scaling from a modest 2 or 4 channel interface to something that claims unlimited I/O. You suddenly have to manage a zoo of cables, route dozens of channels, and keep an eye on CPU load while trying to stay creative. The Apple X8p promises to smooth all that with its Thunderbolt 3 connection, 32-inch UAD, and a built-in DSP engine that runs UAD plugins on its own hardware. In theory, you get pristine conversion, instant access to classic emulations, and all the latency-free monitoring that makes tracking feel like it belongs in a professional studio. The question is whether those promises hold up when you plug in a mic, hit record, and try to keep the session flowing. The first thing I noticed when setting up the unit was the auto gain feature. Most people who upgrade to an 8-input interface spend a lot of time hunting for the right gain knobs on each channel. Auto gain, as the name suggests, scans each active input, finds the optimal headroom, and sets the levels for you in seconds. In a real-world scenario, say you're recording a full band live, you can drop a drum kit, a guitar amp, a vocal mic, and a few line-level synths, tap the auto gain button, and the Apollo instantly balances everything. It saved us from the usual turn it up so it's not too quiet, then lower it because it's clipping nightmare. For anyone who hates the endless tweaking before a take, that's a genuine time saver. Now, what about the conversion quality that Universal Audio markets as next generation, widest dynamic range and lowest distortion? Listening to a simple acoustic guitar track, the low end feels surprisingly detailed. The bass management controls let you steer sub-frequency content down a dedicated output, which is handy if you have a subwoofer in your monitoring chain. In practice, that means the bottom end of a kick drum or a synth bass sits more solidly in the mix without the usual muddiness you sometimes encounter on cheaper converters. A producer I spoke with noted that after moving from a 24-bit/96 kHz card to the Apollo, the difference was most noticeable on complex harmonic content, think a piano or a full choir, where the nuance of each overtone became more apparent. If your work relies on those rich textures, the extra conversion fidelity is a tangible benefit. On the flip side, the Apple X8p does come with hidden trade-offs that tend to get buried under the hype. The biggest one is the Thunderbolt 3 requirement. While Thunderbolt is blazing fast, not every laptop or desktop has native support, especially older Macs or PCs that only have USB-C without the necessary controller. Users have reported needing to install additional drivers or, in some cases, downgrade OS versions to maintain stability. If you're a home studio owner who doesn't want to tinker with system updates, that could become a roadblock. In addition, the unit's hardware DSP chip can run 200+ UAD plugins, but you still need an external power supply for the 8 preamps, which means a larger desk footprint and a few extra cables. For a tight space setup, packing that many I/O modules onto a small rack might feel cramped. One area where the Apollo really shines is its plugin ecosystem. The bundle includes over 200 UAD DSP and native plugins, ranging from classic analog emulations like the UA1176 compressor to modern creative tools. Because the DSP runs on the card itself, you can load multiple high-quality plugins on every track without worrying about your computer's CPU spiking. In a realistic mixing session with 30+ tracks, I could keep the native DAW plugins light while stacking a few UAD EQs, compressors, and tape simulations on the master bus. The result was a warm, analog-like cohesion that would have required a much higher CPU budget on a standard setup. For mix engineers who already rely heavily on UAD's library, the Apollo isn't just an interface, it's a plugin host that expands creative possibilities. However, that same richness can also be a downside for newcomers. The sheer number of plugins can be overwhelming if you've never used UAD gear before. The interface's control panel is packed with tabs, and figuring out where each emulation lives takes a learning curve. In my experience, beginners tend to default to the preset sounds, which can lead to a homogenized mix if they never explore the deeper parameters. If you're just starting out and only need a few basic I/O channels, a simpler, less feature-dense interface